Have you noticed something shifting? Not dramatically, quietly, like pieces of your life that used to fit perfectly suddenly don't anymore. The relationship that worked for years feels off. The job that was fine now feels suffocating. The goals you were chasing don't excite you the way they used to. And there's this strange restlessness you can't shake. This feeling that something needs to change but you don't know what. And maybe you've been trying to fix it, trying to get back to how things were, trying to find that stability again. But it's not working. And you're wondering, is something wrong with me? Did I break something that was working? Am I sabotaging my own life? Here's what I want you to consider. What if nothing is wrong? What if this discomfort, this sense that things are falling out of alignment, what if it's not a problem to solve? What if it's a signal? Your life telling you that you've outgrown the container you're in, that the version of life that worked before doesn't fit the version of you that's emerging. And the falling away, the dissolution of what was, it's not failure. It's not loss. It's life making space, clearing out what no longer serves so something better can come in. Not because what you had was bad, because you've grown past it. And growth requires room, and room requires letting go. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He studied transformation his entire life, not just in theory. He lived it. There was a period where everything he'd built, everything that gave his life structure and meaning, fell apart. His career, his relationships, his sense of identity. And he could have fought it, could have tried to force everything back to normal, but he didn't. He recognized it for what it was, not a breakdown, a breakthrough, the psyche reorganizing itself at a higher level, and he went through it, let it transform him. And what emerged on the other side changed not just his life, but the entire field of psychology. Because he understood something most people miss, that falling apart and coming together aren't opposites. They're phases of the same process. And you can't skip the falling apart phase and get to the coming together phase. The dissolution is what creates the space for the new form. He called it enantiodromia, the principle that when something reaches completion, when it's been held in one form as long as it can be, it transforms into its opposite. Not to destroy you, to evolve you. Order becomes chaos. Stability becomes change. The known becomes unknown. And it feels uncomfortable because you're between forms. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And that in-between space is disorienting. But it's also sacred. It's where transformation happens, where the old you dies and the new you is born. And if you're in that space right now, if things feel unstable and uncertain and like you're losing your grip, you're not falling apart. You're being reorganized, at a level you can't see yet, into a form you can't imagine yet, into a life that's more aligned with who you actually are, not who you thought you had to be. And I know it doesn't feel like that when you're in it. It feels like loss, like confusion, like something is going wrong. But that's only because you're in the middle, and the middle of any transformation looks like chaos. The caterpillar doesn't feel like it's becoming a butterfly when it's dissolving in the cocoon. It feels like it's dying, but it's not dying. It's changing. And you're changing too. And the parts of your life that are falling away, they're not being taken from you. They're being released by you. By the part of you that knows what's coming next requires more space than what you currently have. And making space sometimes means letting go of what was good so you can receive what's great. And what's coming is worth the dissolution, even though you can't see it yet. Especially because you can't see it yet. The falling apart isn't happening to you. It's happening through you. And it's not random, it's intelligent. Precise. Targeting exactly what needs to go so exactly what needs to come can arrive. And you don't have to understand it right now. You don't have to see the full picture. You just have to trust that the chaos has a purpose, that the dissolution is creating space, that the falling apart is actually the first phase of coming together. And the coming together is going to be more beautiful than anything you're releasing right now. Not because I'm promising you some perfect future, because I understand the pattern. And the pattern is, life doesn't dismantle what's working, it only dismantles what's complete. And completion isn't an ending, It's a doorway, and you're walking through it right now. And what's on the other side is worth every moment of the journey through the unknown. Here's what Jung discovered that changes everything about how you understand what's happening to you. The psyche is not passive. It's not just responding to your life. It's actively organizing your life. And it has one primary drive: wholeness. Not happiness, not success, not stability. Wholeness. And wholeness means integrating everything you are, not just the parts you've developed, not just the identity you've built. Everything. The parts you've ignored, the potential you've suppressed, the versions of yourself you abandoned to fit into the life you thought you were supposed to have. And when the gap between who you've become and who you actually are gets too wide, when you've been living in a form that's too narrow for too long, the psyche intervenes. And the intervention looks like dismantling. Not because it's punishing you, because it's correcting course, because the life you built, however good it looked from the outside, was constructed around a limited version of you. And that version worked for a while. It got you here. It created safety, structure, identity. But it's not big enough for what's trying to emerge now. And the psyche knows this before you do. It feels the constriction. It senses the parts of you that are suffocating under the weight of who you've been trying to be. And it starts loosening the structure, gently at first. A feeling of restlessness, a sense that something's off, a quiet dissatisfaction you can't explain. And if you listen to those signals, if you make space for what's trying to come through, the dismantling can be gradual, conscious, collaborative. But most people don't listen. They dismiss the restlessness as ingratitude. They ignore the dissatisfaction and try to push through. They double down on the life they've built, thinking more effort will make it work. And the psyche, which will not be ignored, escalates. The relationship that was merely uncomfortable becomes unbearable. The job that was tolerable becomes impossible. The goals that felt slightly hollow become completely meaningless. And suddenly it's not a gentle nudge anymore. It's a collapse. Everything falls apart. Not because you failed to hold it together, because the psyche decided it was time. And what the psyche decides happens, whether you're ready or not. And here's the thing Jung understood that most people don't. This process is intelligent. It's not random chaos. It's not bad luck. It's not the universe testing you. It's your own psyche, your own inner intelligence, dismantling what's too small so it can build something larger. And it knows exactly what needs to go. Not the things you think should go. Not the comfortable things you're willing to release. The things that are actually keeping you limited. The relationship that was safe but kept you small. The career that was stable but numbed your soul. The identity that was acceptable but wasn't true. Those things. The things you would never choose to let go of on your own. Because you can't see yet that letting go of them is the only way to access what's next. And the psyche doesn't dismantle everything. It's precise. It targets the structures built on false foundations. The parts of your life constructed around who you thought you should be instead of who you are. The roles you took on to please others. The paths you followed because they made sense, not because they were yours. The versions of success you chased because culture said they mattered. All of that, if it's not aligned with your actual nature, if it's not in service of your wholeness, the psyche will dismantle it. Not to hurt you, to free you. To remove the obstacles between you and the life that's actually yours. And this is why fighting the collapse doesn't work. Because you're not fighting external circumstances. You're fighting your own evolution. You're trying to hold together what your psyche is trying to take apart. And your psyche is more powerful than your will. It's more patient than your resistance. It will wait. It will persist. It will escalate. Until you finally stop trying to rebuild what's meant to fall. Until you surrender to the process. Until you trust that the dismantling is not destruction. It's demolition. Controlled. Intentional. Clearing the ground so the real structure, the one that can hold all of you, can finally be built. And once you understand this, once you see that the chaos isn't random but intelligent, that it's not happening to you but for you, that it's not evidence of failure but evidence of evolution, everything changes. You stop fighting. You stop trying to force stability. You stop mourning what's falling away, and you start asking a different question. Not why is this happening, but what is this making space for? Not how do I fix this, but what am I becoming? And those questions, asked with genuine curiosity instead of fear, open you to the actual transformation. The one your psyche has been trying to guide you toward all along, the one that requires the falling apart, so the coming together can be real. There's a pattern to how transformation works, and the pattern is consistent, not just in your life, in every life, in nature, in systems, in stories, in myths, in the structure of growth itself. The pattern is this: death precedes birth, dissolution precedes creation, chaos precedes order, not sometimes, always. And the reason you can't see the pattern while you're in it is because you're focused on the death part, the falling apart, the loss, the uncertainty, and you can't see from that position that the death is making space for birth, that the dissolution is preparing for creation, that the chaos is organizing into a higher order. You just see the ending, and endings feel like failure when you don't know their beginnings. Jung called this the nigredo, the blackening, the first stage of alchemical transformation where everything turns dark, where the substance being transformed loses its original form completely, becomes unrecognizable, looks ruined, and the alchemists knew this stage was necessary, that you couldn't skip it, that trying to avoid the blackening meant staying stuck in the original form, and the original form, while stable, while known, while safe, could never become gold. Only the substance that went through complete dissolution, that surrendered to the darkness, that allowed itself to be unmade, only that substance could be transformed into something precious. And you're in the nigredo right now, the blackening, where everything you were is dissolving. And it looks like destruction, but it's preparation. And here's what you need to understand about this phase. It has a timeline. It's not permanent. It doesn't last forever. It lasts as long as it needs to last to complete the work. To fully dissolve what needs to dissolve. To fully release what needs to release. To fully clear what needs to clear. And you can't rush it. You can't skip steps. You can't decide you've had enough and force your way to the next phase. The psyche doesn't work that way. Transformation doesn't work that way. The nigredo completes when it completes, and trying to end it prematurely just prolongs it, because the work isn't done yet, and the work will be done, one way or another, whether you cooperate or resist. But cooperation makes it faster. Resistance makes it longer. So what does cooperation look like? It looks like letting go, not forcing yourself to let go, just stopping the fight to hold on. It looks like grieving what's ending instead of pretending it's not ending. It looks like sitting in the uncertainty instead of desperately trying to create false certainty. It looks like admitting you don't know what comes next instead of clinging to plans that no longer feel right. It looks like being in the darkness without trying to turn on all the lights, because the darkness isn't the enemy. The darkness is the cocoon, and the cocoon is where the transformation happens. And if you keep trying to break out of it prematurely, if you keep trying to escape the discomfort, you interrupt the process. And the process has to start over, and you end up in the nigredo longer than you needed to be. But if you let it happen, if you allow the dissolution without fighting it, if you trust that the falling apart is intelligent even when it feels terrible, something shifts, not externally at first, internally. You stop being terrified of the chaos. You stop interpreting it as evidence you're doing life wrong. You start seeing it as evidence you're in transition. And transition, by definition, means you're not where you were and you're not where you're going. You're between. And between is uncomfortable. But between is temporary. And on the other side of between is the new form. The one you couldn't access without going through the dissolution. The one that's more aligned, more whole, more true. The one that's worth every moment of the chaos you're enduring right now. And you won't see this clearly until you're through it. That's how the pattern works. You can't see the full arc while you're in the middle. You can only see the devastation, the loss, the uncertainty, But once you're through, once the new form has emerged, once the coming together has completed, you'll look back at the falling apart and you'll see it differently. Not as the worst thing that happened to you, as the thing that freed you from a life that was too small, from an identity that was too narrow, from a version of yourself that was safe but not true, and you'll understand with complete clarity that the chaos was the plan, that the psyche knew what it was doing, that the dissolution was necessary, and that everything that fell apart, so everything that needed to come together could finally come together. And when that happens, when you're living in the new form and you can see the full pattern, you'll be grateful, not for the pain, but for the transformation. And you'll know without any doubt that you couldn't have gotten here any other way. So you understand the pattern now. You know the falling apart is intelligent. You know it's not random. You know it's making space. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less. And you're still in it. Still watching your life dissolve. Still waking up every day not knowing who you are anymore or where you're going or what you're building toward. And you need something practical. Something you can actually do. Not to stop the collapse. You can't stop it. But to move through it without breaking. To navigate the chaos without losing yourself completely. So here's what actually helps. And it's not what you think. You don't need a plan. You don't need to figure out what comes next. You don't need to know who you're becoming or what your new life looks like. Trying to answer those questions right now is trying to skip to the end before the middle is complete. And the middle is where you are. In the dissolution. And the only job you have in the dissolution is to be in the dissolution. Not to transcend it. Not to rise above it. Not to spiritually bypass it. To be in it. Fully. Consciously. With as much presence as you can manage. Because presence is what allows the transformation to complete, and resistance is what prolongs it. Here's the practice. And it's so simple you'll probably dismiss it. But simple doesn't mean easy. Every day, you ask yourself one question. What am I avoiding feeling right now? And you sit with whatever comes up. Not to analyze it, not to solve it, not to make it better, to feel it. Grief, fear, rage, emptiness, loss, whatever is actually here. Because what's actually here is what needs to move through you. And it can't move through you if you're avoiding it. And most people spend the entire collapse avoiding, staying busy, staying distracted, staying numb. And the emotions they're avoiding stay stuck. And stuck emotions keep you stuck in the negrito. Not because feeling them is some magical cure. Because unfelt emotions are unprocessed energy. And unprocessed energy blocks transformation. And the transformation is trying to happen. But it can't complete until you let yourself actually feel what you're feeling. And I'm not talking about wallowing. I'm not talking about drowning in emotion. I'm talking about acknowledgement. About sitting down, placing your hand on your chest and saying, I'm terrified right now. And that's okay. I'm allowed to be terrified. Or, I'm grieving right now, and that's okay. I'm allowed to grieve. You give the emotion space. You let it be here. You stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting it, something strange happens. It moves. Not immediately. Not because you wanted it to, but because that's what emotions do when you let them. They arise. They peak. They pass. But only if you don't block them. Only if you don't resist them. Only if you allow them to be exactly what they are without trying to change them into something more comfortable. If you're in the collapse right now and you're ready to stop resisting what you're feeling, write "it moves through me" in the comments. Not as affirmation, as commitment. You're not going to avoid anymore. You're not going to spiritually bypass anymore. You're not going to pretend you're fine when you're not. You're going to feel what's here and let it move. And trust that the moving is part of the transformation. And the transformation is taking you somewhere you can't get to by staying numb. The other part of the practice is this. Stop trying to make decisions about the future. I know that's counterintuitive. I know every part of you wants to plan, to control, to figure out what's next. But you're not in a position to make those decisions right now. Because you're not the person who's going to live that future. You're the person who's dissolving so that person can emerge. And decisions made from the dissolving state are almost always wrong. Because they're made from fear, from the need for control, from the desperate attempt to create stability in the middle of chaos. And those decisions lock you into forms that are just as limited as the ones that are falling apart. So you wait. You sit in the not knowing. You let the collapse complete. And when the new form begins to emerge, when you start to feel solid again, when clarity returns, that's when you make decisions, not before. Before is too soon, and too soon means repeating the pattern instead of completing it. This doesn't mean you do nothing. You take care of yourself, you handle what needs handling, you show up for your responsibilities, but you don't make big decisions. You don't commit to new paths. You don't try to build the next version of your life while the old version is still dying. You let the death complete. You trust that when it's time to build, you'll know, and you'll have the energy for it, and you'll have the clarity for it. But right now, in the middle, you don't have those things. And trying to force them just interrupts the process. So you practice presence. You feel what's here. You wait. And you trust. And trust in the middle of collapse is the hardest and most important thing you can do. The coming together doesn't announce itself. There's no moment where the universe says, okay, transformation complete, here's your new life. What happens is subtler, quieter. You wake up one day and you realize you're not thinking about the thing that fell apart anymore. Not obsessively, not with that sharp pain. It's just there, in the past. Part of your story, but not the center of it, and that's the first sign. The emotional charge has shifted. What devastated you a month ago, 2 months ago, doesn't devastate you now. It's just something that happened, something that needed to happen, and you can see that now. Not because someone convinced you, because the transformation progressed far enough that you can finally see what you couldn't see before. That the falling apart made space, and the space is real. And then you start noticing new things appearing, not things you planned, not things you manifested through visualization or affirmations, things that just show up, an opportunity you weren't looking for, a person who enters your life at exactly the right time, a realization that shifts everything, an idea that feels true in a way nothing has felt true in a long time. And these aren't random. These are the first signs of the new form. The life that's coming together. Not in the shape of the old life. In a completely new shape. One you couldn't have designed because you didn't know it was possible. Because the version of you that's emerging didn't exist before the collapse. And this version sees differently, wants differently, creates differently. And here's the strange thing. The new life doesn't feel hard. It doesn't feel like effort. It feels like flow. Like you're finally moving with the current instead of against it. And you realize, looking back, that the old life always felt like pushing, like forcing, like trying to make things work that didn't quite fit. And you thought that was normal. You thought life was supposed to be hard. But it wasn't life that was hard. It was living in the wrong form that was hard. And now that you're in a form that actually fits, that actually aligns with who you are, everything is easier. Not because your circumstances are perfect, because you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not trying to be someone you're not. You're not holding together a life that wants to fall apart. You're just being, and being is effortless. The relationships that stay are different too, or new relationships appear that are different, deeper, more honest, more real, because you're different. And the version of you that's here now doesn't tolerate surface-level connection, doesn't have patience for dynamics that aren't mutual, doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. And that's not arrogance. That's wholeness. You went through the dissolution. You felt everything. You faced the chaos. And you came out more integrated, more complete. And complete people attract different things than fragmented people. They attract truth, depth, alignment. And the connections that form from that place are the kind that last, not because you're trying to make them last, because they're built on something real. And the work you do, if that changes, it changes in the direction of meaning. Not just income, not just status. Meaning. Work that feels like expression instead of obligation. Work that uses what's actually in you instead of what you think should be in you. Work that energizes instead of depletes. And you might not know what that work is yet. The form might still be emerging, but you know the old work doesn't fit anymore. And you're not willing to force it. You're not willing to go back to the life that was too small just because it's familiar. Because you know now what happens when you stay in a form that's too small. It falls apart, and you don't want to go through another collapse. So you stay patient. You trust the timing. You let the new form reveal itself, and it does, in its own time, in its own way. And when you're fully through, when the new life has stabilized, when the coming together is complete, you'll look back at the falling apart and you won't see it as trauma. You'll see it as initiation, as the thing that broke you open so you could finally become whole, as the chaos that was actually the plan, and you'll be grateful, not for the pain, but for what the pain made possible. A life you couldn't have accessed any other way, a version of yourself you couldn't have become without the dissolution, and you'll understand finally that the psyche knew what it was doing, that Jung was right, that the falling apart and the coming together were never separate. They were always the same process, and the process was always intelligent. And you were never falling, you were always becoming. There will come a moment, maybe months from now, maybe years, where you'll be living in the life that came together after the falling apart. And someone will ask you how you got here, how you made the change, how you found the clarity, how you built this version of your life that actually feels like yours. And you'll pause, because the answer isn't what they expect. The answer isn't I made a plan and executed it. The answer isn't I manifested it through visualization. The answer isn't even I worked really hard. The answer is everything fell apart and I let it. And they won't understand, because they're still in the paradigm that says falling apart is failure, that chaos is the enemy, that you're supposed to hold everything together at all costs. And you were in that paradigm too, not long ago. You were fighting the collapse, trying to force stability, thinking something was wrong with you because you couldn't keep it together. But you learned something they don't know yet, something Jung spent his life trying to teach. That wholeness doesn't come from holding yourself together. It comes from letting yourself fall apart, completely, so you can reorganize at a level that includes everything you are, not just the parts that fit the life you thought you were supposed to have. And the falling apart wasn't the problem. The falling apart was the solution to a problem you didn't even know you had. The problem of living in a form too small for your soul. The problem of being a partial version of yourself because the full version didn't fit into the life you'd constructed. The problem of success that felt empty, relationships that felt hollow, goals that felt meaningless, because none of it was actually yours. It was just what you thought you were supposed to want. And the psyche, which will not let you live a lie forever, dismantled it. Not to punish you, to free you, to show you that the life you were clinging to was the cage, and the falling apart was the door opening. And you walked through that door, not because you were brave, because you didn't have a choice. The old life ended, and you had two options. Spend the rest of your life trying to rebuild what was, or step into the unknown and see what wants to emerge. And you chose emergence. Maybe not consciously at first. Maybe you were dragged through it kicking and screaming. But eventually, you stopped fighting. Eventually, you surrendered. Eventually, you trusted. And trust, in the middle of chaos, is the ultimate act of faith. Faith not in some external force. Faith in the intelligence of your own psyche. Faith that the dissolution was preparation. Faith that the coming together was inevitable, and that faith was rewarded. Not because the universe rewards faith, because faith allows the transformation to complete. And completion was always what was trying to happen. If you want the complete framework for navigating dissolution and emergence, for understanding the deeper patterns of psychological transformation, everything is in the ebook, Awaken Your Quantum Power. Link in the pinned comment. For people who understand that transformation is real and want to move through it consciously instead of being dragged through it unconsciously. But whether you go deeper or not, you now understand the pattern. You know that falling apart and coming together are not opposites. They're phases. You know that chaos is not the enemy of order. It's the precursor to higher order. You know that the psyche is not passive. It's active, intelligent, organizing your life toward wholeness even when it looks like it's destroying your life. And you know that the destruction is not random. It's precise.